Welcome to Dreamscribe, your companion on the journey to peaceful sleep. Before you drift off, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps this calming community grow. Where in the world are you tuning in from? If you've ever taken a long drive at night, you know the feeling. The hum of the engine, the rhythmic flash of highway lights, the hypnotic stretch of dark road ahead. It can lull you into a strange state. Time feels different when you're driving alone. An hour can pass in what feels like minutes, or maybe it's the other way around. I wasn't even supposed to take that road. It was meant to be a quick trip, 4 hours from one city to another, a drive I had done plenty of times before. I left just after dusk, hoping to reach my destination before midnight. My GPS showed a straightforward route, but somewhere along the way, I hit unexpected roadwork. A flashing detour sign pointed left. Alternate route, expect delays. I hesitated. The regular highway was blocked off, leaving me with no other option. The GPS recalibrated and displayed a new estimated time, 4 hours and 30 minutes. A slight delay, nothing more. Or at least, that's what I thought. Establishing MC and setting, driving alone, nighttime highway, eerily quiet surroundings. The new route felt strangely isolated. The road was narrower, barely 2 lanes, with no streetlights. Dense trees loomed on both sides, swallowing the glow of my headlights. The further I drove, the quieter everything became. I hadn't seen another car in miles. No gas stations, no exits, just endless roads stretching into the dark. Even the radio signal cut out, leaving nothing but static. I checked my phone, no signal. That was weird. I wasn't in the middle of nowhere. This wasn't some uncharted back road. But something about the way the trees leaned in, the way the darkness seemed thicker than usual, made me uneasy. Still, I pushed forward. After another 20 minutes, I saw it. Introducing the eerie detail, the tunnel appears ahead, longer and darker than expected. A tunnel. It came out of nowhere, swallowing the road whole. My headlights barely penetrated the darkness beyond its mouth. The entrance was framed by old stone, weathered and cracked, as if it had been there for centuries. A single sign stood at the side of the road, riddled with bullet holes and rust. Expect delays. Time may vary. That last part made me pause. Time may vary? I shook it off. It was probably just a poorly worded warning about traffic or construction inside. But there were no workers, no barriers, no flashing lights, just the tunnel waiting. First unsettling event. Entering the tunnel, initial disorientation, the first sign something is wrong. I exhaled and drove in. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world outside vanished. No fading horizon, no gradual transition, just instant blackness, as if the tunnel had devoured everything behind me. I flicked on my high beams. The tunnel stretched ahead in a perfect, unbroken curve. The walls were smooth, lined with flickering yellow lights. I gripped the wheel a little tighter. Tunnels never felt this enclosed before. The sound of my tires echoed strangely. The usual hum of my engine seemed muffled, almost as if I were hearing it from underwater. I checked the clock on my dashboard. 10:17 p.m. By my estimation, this tunnel should take no more than a minute to pass through. But as I drove, the exit never appeared. MC rationalizes. Maybe it's just longer than expected, but discomfort grows. I frowned, glancing at my GPS. Loading. That was weird. The screen was frozen, showing nothing but an empty grid where the map should be. I flicked through radio stations, but all I got was static. A minute passed. Then 2. The tunnel kept going. My hands tightened on the wheel. Maybe it was just longer than expected. Some mountain tunnels stretched for miles, right? Maybe I misjudged. But the strange thing was, I hadn't passed a single sign. No emergency exits, no markings, no indication of progress. It was just the same stretch of tunnel, repeating over and over. I checked the time again. 10:17 p.m. That couldn't be right. I glanced at my phone. No signal. The screen showed the exact same time. 10:17 p.m. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. I pressed the gas pedal, speeding up slightly. Still no exit. Final eerie escalation. The tunnel starts to feel unnatural, subtle shifts in perception. Something feels off. Something was wrong. I turned my head slightly, trying to get a better look at the walls. They weren't moving. I was driving. I could feel the car accelerating, but the tunnel walls remained still, like a painted backdrop. The road markings were the same. The exact same. My breath came quicker. I slammed the brakes. The car lurched to a stop. Silence. I checked the odometer. It showed 0 miles traveled. I had been driving for at least 5 minutes. I put the car in reverse, heart pounding. The engine revved, the tires moved, but the tunnel didn't change. The walls remained still. The road markings stayed exactly the same. No progress, no motion. It was as if I was stuck in place. I reached for my phone with shaky hands, turning on the flashlight. The moment I did, something flickered in my rearview mirror. A figure, a shadowy shape standing in the distance, back where I had come from. I spun in my seat, eyes darting to the tunnel behind me. Nothing. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was closer. A pulse of sheer terror shot through me. I slammed the gas, pushing the speedometer past 70. The tunnel blurred past me, lights flickering faster. Still no exit. The clock on my dashboard remained frozen. 10:17 p.m. That was when I realized I was never getting out. I forced myself to breathe slowly. The car's headlights stretched into the tunnel, illuminating the smooth, curving walls. I could see every detail, the yellowish glow of the overhead lights, the cracks in the pavement, the white road markings. But something about them felt wrong. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my thoughts. It's just a long tunnel, I told myself. Maybe my GPS was bugging out, and maybe the radio had lost signal because I was underground. Maybe I was just overthinking things. But that didn't explain the clock, the fact that time hadn't changed. I flicked my eyes toward the dashboard again. 10:17 p.m. Still. I reached for my phone, flipping it over to check the lock screen. 10:17 p.m. I tapped it. Nothing changed. The time wasn't frozen. It wasn't even counting seconds. It was like the device had just stopped. A thick knot twisted in my stomach. I kept driving, but my fingers were gripping the wheel too tightly now. My breathing was too loud. Calm down. You're just panicking. Still, a gnawing feeling in the back of my mind told me something was horribly wrong. I needed to prove I was making progress. Second, more intense experience, testing reality, but everything feels off. Up ahead, a faded road sign was bolted into the tunnel wall. Tunnel length, 1 mile. I stared at it. 1 mile. That meant, at the speed I was going, I should be out in under a minute. I kept my eyes locked on the odometer. I counted every second. 30 seconds. 45. A full minute. The exit should be appearing any moment now. I waited. Nothing. I kept driving, but the walls weren't changing. The overhead lights flickered at the exact same intervals. I started watching them closely, noticing something that made my chest tighten. The pattern of the lights, they weren't just flickering. They were repeating. Every 15 seconds, they blinked in the same way. The same crack in the pavement passed beneath my tires. The same flicker of a shadow danced on the far wall. I gritted my teeth. No, I wasn't about to let my mind trick me. I grabbed a crumpled receipt from the center console, and keeping one hand on the wheel, I threw it out the window. It tumbled behind me, catching the light, then vanished into the darkness. I pressed forward. 10 seconds. 20. 30. A minute passed. Then, there it was. The exact same receipt, fluttering onto the pavement ahead of me. My breath hitched. That was impossible. I clenched my jaw, refusing to believe it. I grabbed a pen from my cup holder, flipping it open with a snap. With shaky fingers, I scribbled on my palm. Test. Then I held out my hand, turned it toward the tunnel wall, and pressed my fingers against the stone. The surface was cold, gritty, real. I exhaled and pulled my hand back, glancing at my palm to see the ink smeared from the touch. But the second I looked down, my heart stopped. There was no ink. My hand was completely clean. I stared at it, throat tightening. My fingers had definitely touched the wall. I had felt it. I had expected the ink to smear. But there was no trace. Like I had never touched anything at all. Sensory details escalate. Tunnel starts feeling more unnatural. The air grows heavier, reality warps. I clenched my jaw. My heart was hammering now, but I wasn't ready to panic. Not yet. I rolled down the window, letting in a rush of air. Except, there was no air. No movement. No draft. It was like the space beyond my window was empty. The air inside the car still felt normal, cool against my skin, thick with my own breathing. But outside, it was as if the tunnel wasn't filled with air at all. I clenched my fists and swallowed hard. I need to get out of here. I pressed the gas pedal down, speeding up. The tunnel around me seemed to stretch endlessly. My headlights didn't even feel like they were reaching the end anymore, just cutting through an abyss that had no exit. The radio static suddenly shifted. I jumped, glancing at the dashboard. The noise wasn't just random now. It was warping. The crackling hiss was twisting into something else. Something rhythmic. A voice. At first, it was too distorted to make out, but as I listened closer, I realized it was repeating a number. Faint, crackling, whispered between the static. I turned up the volume, pulse pounding, and then I heard it clearly. 10:17, 10:17, 10:17 p.m. I choked on a breath. I looked down at the clock on the dashboard. Still frozen. The radio repeated the number again. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, silence. Feeling of being watched. MC starts to feel a presence. Paranoia grows. Unseen forces manipulate their perception. My pulse roared in my ears. I twisted in my seat, scanning the tunnel behind me. Empty. At least, it looked empty. But the darkness at the far end of my rearview mirror felt wrong. Like something was there. Watching. I squeezed the steering wheel tighter. I was not going to lose it. I leaned forward, staring at the road ahead. My own breath was the only sound now. Even the engine felt too quiet. Then I saw it. A shadow. Not a trick of the light. Not a flicker of the tunnel lamps. Something large moved just beyond the glow of my headlights, sliding along the far wall. I blinked. My hands went numb on the wheel. But when I focused, it was gone. A chill crept up my spine. I licked my lips and forced myself to keep driving, but my gut screamed at me. Something was inside this tunnel. Something I couldn't see. I checked my rearview mirror again, and my stomach dropped. The shadow wasn't on the wall anymore. It was sitting in my back seat. I slammed the brakes. My chest felt tight, my throat locking up as I refused to turn around. I could see it in the mirror. A silhouette, its head tilted slightly like it knew I could see it. My breath came out in quick, shuddering gasps. My hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. And then, it moved. Fast. The shape in the mirror lunged forward. I screamed. My hands jerked the wheel. The tires screeched. And then suddenly, everything was silent. The tunnel stretched ahead, empty. I was alone. The shadow was gone. But something told me it wasn't finished with me yet. MC starts losing logical reasoning. The tunnel is not just long, it is unnatural. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles turning white. The shadow had been in the back seat. I had seen it, and now it was gone. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead of me, the overhead lights flickering in their eerily perfect loop. No matter how much I pressed the gas, no matter how much I stared at the road ahead, the exit never appeared. I forced myself to take slow, deep breaths. Think. Don't panic. I had to break whatever this was. I needed to find a way out, if not physically, then mentally. I tapped the GPS screen. It was still frozen. No signal. No tracking. I checked the clock. 10:17 p.m. Still. It wasn't that the tunnel was long. It was something else. The road wasn't looping. I had tested that with the receipt. So why wasn't I reaching the end? I had to be moving. My speedometer was working. My engine was running. I wasn't trapped in a single repeating moment. Was I? I swallowed hard. I needed a new way to test this. Objects move, sounds grow more disturbing. MC tries to prove they are progressing, but the tunnel fights back. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a handful of coins. One by one, I flicked them out the window. I kept my eyes on them, watching them bounce and roll along the pavement. Then I sped up. I counted 10 seconds. 20. 30. I should be far past them by now. But then in my headlights, the coins appeared again, rolling in the exact same pattern, as if I had just thrown them. I slammed on the brakes. My heart thundered against my ribs. I got out of the car. The air outside was wrong. Not cold, not warm. Just nothing. The tunnel walls stretched impossibly high above me. I knelt down, picking up one of the coins. It was warm, like it had just left my palm. I turned it over in my fingers, something sickening crawling up my spine. I hadn't just looped back to them. They had never left. It was as if I had thrown them, and time had just stopped. I swallowed back a wave of nausea. I needed to test something else. I opened the driver's side door and clicked on the hazard lights. The tunnel lit up in rhythmic, flashing red. I took a deep breath. Then I walked forward, away from the car. I counted my steps. 1, 2, 3. I kept my gaze forward. I wouldn't let myself look back. I walked for exactly 1 minute. Then I stopped. I turned around, and my stomach dropped. I was standing next to the car. The hazard lights flashed against the tunnel walls, blinking like a silent warning. I spun in a slow circle, my breath coming out in uneven gasps. I had walked straight. I had counted my steps. But no matter how far I went, I never left. I forced down a shutter. Then, from somewhere in the distance, footsteps. I froze. Not mine. Someone else's. Light. Shuffling. Growing closer. I turned toward the sound, heart hammering in my ears. Nothing was there. But the footsteps didn't stop. I stumbled back toward the car, my pulse racing. The second I shut the door, silence, like nothing had ever been there. I sat motionless in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Then, the radio crackled. My heart stuttered. The same rhythmic static, whispering through the speakers. Then, beneath the crackling, breathing. Not mine. Slow, deliberate breaths. In, out, in, out. I turned the volume down. The breathing continued. Someone was inside the car with me. Physical evidence appears. The entity starts making itself known. I refused to look in the rearview mirror. I couldn't. I gripped the wheel so tightly my nails bit into my palm. The breathing was behind me. I could feel it. And then, the temperature in the car dropped. My skin prickled as a cold, damp chill crawled over me. I exhaled shakily. My breath fogged up the windshield. That shouldn't be happening. The air in the car had been normal seconds ago. My breath left a perfect layer of condensation on the glass. And then, right in front of me, something started writing in it. Long, slender lines, slowly dragging across the fogged glass. I sucked in a breath, paralyzed as letters took shape. Turn around. A cold, wet breath brushed against my ear. No. I slammed the gas pedal. The car roared forward. The tunnel stretched ahead endlessly, but I didn't care. I wasn't stopping. The engine screamed as I pushed it faster, faster. Then, a handprint appeared on the inside of the windshield. Not mine. Too large. Too long. I let out a strangled breath, panic clamping around my chest. I could see the fingers moving, pressing against the glass, like it was trying to crawl through. Then the fingers dragged down slowly. The windshield screeched, like nails against metal. I turned on the wipers. The glass cleared, and the handprint was gone. MC involves someone else, but they don't experience the same thing. I needed help. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I pressed call. The ringtone buzzed in my ear, the only real sound anchoring me. Then, a click. Hello. It was a woman's voice. Soft. Wrong. I swallowed hard. I need help, I choked out. I'm stuck. In the tunnel. I can't get out. A pause. Then, static. Then, laughter. The line went dead. I stared at the screen. I had never dialed a number. The phone had just called someone on its own. I dropped it onto the passenger seat, while rising in my throat. Then, from the speakers, a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded close. I grabbed the phone again, forcing myself to dial 911. It rang once, twice. Then, what exit? I froze. The voice on the other end wasn't a dispatcher. It was my own. The call cut off. I nearly dropped the phone. My entire body was trembling now. What is happening? I slammed my foot on the gas, my heart racing as I stared at the road ahead. I would not stay here. I had to find the exit. Then, out of the corner of my eye, something moved in the passenger seat. I turned my head slowly. The seat was empty, but the seatbelt was buckled, like someone was there. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just drove. But I could feel it. Something was sitting right next to me, and it was waiting. One major event forces MC to accept the unnatural. There is no logic anymore, only terror. I didn't know how long I had been driving anymore. Minutes? Hours? Days? The tunnel had stripped me of time, of direction, of hope. I had tried everything. I had driven faster, slower, reversed, stopped. Nothing worked. The tunnel just stretched on. And the thing sitting in my passenger seat? It never left. The seatbelt remained buckled, perfectly still. But the air around it was wrong. Like a vacuum, swallowing sound, swallowing warmth. I refused to look directly at it, but I felt it. Watching. Waiting. Then, the radio crackled. I jumped, my pulse slamming against my ribs. The static swelled, filling the car like a wave, drowning me in white noise. And then, a voice. We see you. I slammed my hand against the dial, twisting the volume down. It didn't change. The voice grew louder. We see you. I ripped the radio panel from the dashboard with shaking hands. The voice didn't stop. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from the tunnel walls. The concrete pulsed, like something was moving beneath it. Alive. "We see you." The words weren't spoken. They were breathed. I mashed my foot against the gas, the car roaring forward. The tunnel narrowed. I felt it. The walls shifted inward, closing, squeezing. The lights above flickered erratically, their glow turning red, like veins. I tried to scream, but the pressure crushed my chest. Then, the passenger seat creaked. I couldn't stop myself. I looked, and I saw it. A shape sat beside me. Tall, too tall. Its body was shrouded in shifting darkness, as if it wasn't fully formed. But its face, there was no face, only a mirror. And in it, I saw myself, sitting in the driver's seat, mouth open wide in a scream. But my reflection wasn't moving. I wasn't screaming, yet my reflection was frozen in terror, like it could see something I couldn't. Then slowly, its eyes turned black. MC tries to fight back, but the tunnel is alive. I wrenched my eyes away, my entire body trembling. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The tunnel moaned around me, deep and guttural, like something ancient waking up. The road beneath my tires rippled. Not pavement, not concrete. Flesh. I gagged, my stomach twisting violently. The tunnel walls bulged, pulsing, breathing. This wasn't a tunnel. It was a throat, and I was inside it. I yanked the wheel to the right, trying to slam into the wall. The car didn't crash. It sank. The wall absorbed the impact, swallowing metal like it was made of tar. My headlights dimmed, suffocated by the thick, pulsing mass. I screamed, stomping on the brakes. The tunnel screamed back, a deafening, guttural howl that rattled my bones. And then, the dashboard clock changed. For the first time since I had entered the tunnel. 10:18 p.m. 1 minute. 1 minute had passed. I barely had time to process it before the mirror thing moved. It turned its head toward me. The reflection of myself inside the mirror smiled. But I wasn't smiling. The reflection lifted its hand, and I felt cold fingers grip my throat. Unexpected twist. The entity reveals it's aware of MC. I gasped, thrashing in my seat, but there was nothing there. Nothing except the reflection. Smiling, holding me. I clawed at my neck, but my hands passed through air. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't breathe. Then, the reflection leaned closer, mouth moving, speaking, but the words didn't come from the mirror. They came from inside my head. You never left. Terror split through me like lightning. I fought against the invisible grip, my vision tunneling, my lungs burning. Then, the passenger seatbelt unbuckled. The pressure on my throat vanished. I gasped, sucking in ragged, desperate breaths. Then I saw it. The reflection wasn't in the mirror anymore. It was in the passenger seat. It had stepped out, and it was me, sitting beside me, staring, grinning. It reached for the wheel. I jerked away, but my hands felt weak. The thing that looked like me tightened its grip. Then, in a voice that sounded exactly like mine, it whispered, "Drive. Physical manifestation. The tunnel shows its true form." The tunnel collapsed around us. The walls broke apart, peeling back like shredded skin, revealing eyes, hundreds, thousands, blinking in unison, locked onto me. I screamed. The tunnel was alive. Not a place. A thing. The thing that looked like me laughed. I fought it, hands slipping against the wheel as the car lurched forward. The tunnel tightened, constricting. I could feel it pulling me down, dragging me deeper. The lights above shattered, plunging everything into blackness. Only the eyes remained, watching, judging, consuming. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. MC tries to escape, but the truth is worse than they imagined. I had to get out. I had to. I reached for the door handle, fingers slipping, my whole body shaking. Then, the thing beside me grabbed my wrist. And it spoke, not in my voice, but in every voice. A chorus of whispers, of screams, of sobs, all layered over each other. It leaned closer, mouth stretching wider, wider. And it whispered, "You were always here." Then, everything went white. The entity doesn't disappear. The horror is permanent. White. Blinding, endless white. For a moment, I thought I had finally escaped. Maybe I had crashed. Maybe I had died. Maybe this was the afterlife. Then the light dimmed. The whiteness faded, like fog pulling back from a darkened road. And I was still in the car, still gripping the wheel, still inside the tunnel. No, no. I gasped, my breath ragged, my hands trembling against the leather grip of the wheel. Something was wrong. Everything was wrong. The tunnel wasn't moving anymore. But I was. My foot wasn't on the gas. The car rolled forward on its own, like I was being pulled. I reached for the gear shift. It was gone. The radio crackled back to life, but there was no static this time. Just breathing. Shallow. Deep. Like something huge was just behind me. Watching. Waiting. I didn't want to turn around, but I had to. Slowly, I glanced into the rearview mirror, and my stomach turned to ice. There was someone sitting in the back seat. MC is mentally changed, paranoia, obsession, exhaustion. I squeezed my eyes shut. Not real. Not real. When I opened them, they were still there. A man, or something that used to be a man. His face was blurred, like a photograph smeared with shaking hands. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. The headlights flickered. The tunnel lights died. For the first time since I had entered, I was in complete darkness. I could still feel the car moving, still being pulled forward, and in the blackness, something whispered, not from the radio, not from the back seat, from inside my head. Do you remember? I choked on my own breath. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Remember what? I didn't even remember how long I had been driving. The voice laughed. Not loud. Soft. Gentle. Like someone whispering to a child before bed. Then, the tunnel changed. The walls warped, stretched, and I saw them. Not just one person. Hundreds. Their faces were distorted, blurred, melting into the walls. Some had their mouths frozen open in screams. Some had their hands pressed against the surface, as if trying to claw their way out. And one of them looked just like me. Final unsettling moment. MC is trapped, the horror loops. I screamed, wrenching the wheel. The car didn't turn. The road stretched further, longer. The tunnel was infinite. The hands in the walls started moving, reaching. Their fingertips scraped the car's windows. I slammed my fists against the glass, trying to break free. But the windows weren't glass anymore. They were mirrors. And in them, I saw myself, eyes hollow, face pale, mouth moving, speaking words I couldn't hear. Then, the reflection smiled, the same way it had in the passenger seat. And in a voice that sounded exactly like mine, it whispered, "Drive." And I did, because I couldn't stop, because I had never stopped, because I had been here before, and I would be here again, forever. Next story. Calm yet ominous opening, welcoming the audience, YouTube hook. It's funny how some places exist without reason. Roads that shouldn't be there, buildings that don't show up on maps, bridges no one remembers being built. I wasn't looking for anything unusual that night. I was just driving home. It was late, the kind of late where the world feels empty, and the only thing keeping you awake is the glow of your headlights. And then, I found the bridge. It should have been a simple crossing, a stretch of pavement over a river or a canyon, nothing more. But the moment my tires touched its surface, I felt something was wrong. And then the screams started. I had been on the road for hours. My body ached from sitting too long. My eyes burned from staring at the dark highway, and my coffee had gone cold hours ago. The trip had been uneventful, mostly long stretches of empty road cutting through rural backcountry. Every now and then, I'd pass an old gas station or a roadside diner, but for the most part, it was just me and my RV rolling through the dark. I was following the main highway home, but somewhere along the way, my GPS had rerouted me. A detour, it said. Faster route available. I barely thought twice about it. I just took the turn. At first, the road seemed normal, a narrow two-lane stretch cutting through dense woods. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you turn down your music just to make sure you're really alone. That's when I saw it. A bridge, stretching over a fog-covered valley. The first thing I noticed was how old it looked. Not in the way that most backroads look old, but wrongly old. The steel beams were rusted, the pavement cracked. The road sign marking its name was too faded to read. And there were no lights, no railings, just a bridge, stretching out into the dark. Something about it made my stomach knot. But I was tired. I just wanted to get home. I pressed on. The first subtle, eerie detail, unease creeps in. The moment my tires touched the bridge, I felt it. Not just the usual bump of transitioning from asphalt to concrete. Something deeper, heavier. The air felt thicker. Like the second I crossed onto the bridge, I had stepped into a different world. Then came the smell. A sharp, acrid stench, like rusted metal and burnt wood. Faint, but unmistakable. I rolled down the window to check if maybe it was just my engine. But the smell didn't come from the RV. It came from the bridge itself. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Just keep going, I told myself. That's when I heard the first sound. A low, distant wail. It came from below. I turned down my music. Listened. Nothing. The wind, I told myself. Bridges echo weirdly at night. It's just the wind. But then it came again. A sound not quite human, not quite animal. Faint, stretched, like a voice trapped in slow motion. I shook it off, pressing harder on the gas. The faster I got across, the better. First unsettling event. The sounds begin to escalate. Halfway across, the wail grew louder. No longer distant. No longer vague. It sounded like people. Crying. Screaming. I felt my chest tighten. A trick of the wind. An echo? I glanced in my rearview mirror. For a split second, the bridge behind me looked longer than it should have. I blinked. Looked again. It was normal. I told myself I was just tired. But the wailing didn't stop. It was all around me now. Then I heard something else. A whisper. Faint, almost drowned out by the other sounds, but clear enough to make my skin go cold. A voice. A woman's voice. Turn back. I slammed the gas. The RV roared forward, tires screeching against the cracked pavement. I just needed to get off this bridge. I was almost there. Then, something slammed against the roof. A loud metallic thump. The moment of realization. MC knows something is wrong. I nearly lost control. The RV swerved, skidding toward the bridge's rusted guardrails. For a split second, I thought I was about to plunge over the edge. But I managed to regain control. Barely. Heart pounding, I glanced at the roof through the windshield. Nothing. Then another thump. And another. Like something was crawling across the top of the RV. I slammed the brake. The RV shuddered to a stop. Silence. I held my breath. Listening. Nothing. The wailing was gone. The whispers were gone. It was just silent. For a second, I thought maybe it was all in my head. Maybe the stress, the exhaustion, the long drive. But then, as I sat there in the middle of that godforsaken bridge, too scared to move, a single wet handprint appeared on the windshield, right in front of me, dripping, smearing. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. And then, the screaming came back, louder than before. Too close, like it was inside the RV. I didn't think. I didn't look. I just slammed my foot on the gas. And I drove, as fast as I could, praying I would reach the other side. I don't know how long I drove. It felt like hours, but it must have been seconds. When I finally reached the end of the bridge, I pulled over, gasping for breath, my heart hammering. I turned to look back, but the bridge was gone. The road behind me was just empty. No rusted beams. No cracked pavement. Nothing. Like it had never been there at all. I stared, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. And then, in the silence, my radio crackled to life. A single voice, distorted, static-filled, barely above a whisper. You shouldn't have left us. MC tries to rationalize what happened. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, chest rising and falling in uneven breath. The radio was silent now. Dead air. I slowly turned the volume knob, expecting to hear something, anything. But there was nothing. Not even static. For a long moment, I just stared at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the bridge reappear, or worse, someone standing in the road. But there was nothing. Just dark highway stretching into the night. It was a dream, I whispered. That was the only thing that made sense. I was exhausted, driving on a deserted back road, my mind slipping into hallucinations from sleep deprivation. Maybe I'd even nodded off for a second, and my mind had blurred the line between dream and reality. I took a deep breath and reached for my phone. No service. Of course. I let out a shaky laugh. Nothing supernatural about bad reception. Still, something in my gut told me to get moving. I adjusted my mirror, put the RV in gear, and eased back onto the road. Just a dream, I told myself. Just a damn dream. The next signs of wrongness, subtle but disturbing. I kept driving. The road should have taken me back to the main highway soon, but something felt off. The landscape around me looked too similar. Thick woods on either side, an occasional mile marker that had no number. And then there were the road signs. They weren't normal. Faded, rusted. Some were completely blank, like the paint had been scraped away. I passed one that should have said something like bridge ahead or weight limit. But instead, there was just a single word. Listen. I felt my stomach drop. I must have read it wrong. But as I drove further, I saw another sign. This one said, "They are still screaming." I slammed the brakes. Heart pounding, I rubbed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. It had to be a prank. Some sick local kids messing with travelers. I took a breath, pressed on the gas, and kept driving. But the feeling in my chest only grew heavier. Something was watching me. The sound returns, only when MC is vulnerable. It started again around 15 minutes later. A noise. Not the screams. Not yet. It was a low, almost rhythmic knocking sound, like something was tapping against the RV. I glanced at the windshield. No rain. No loose branches. The sound came again. Soft. Persistent. Like fingertips against glass. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep my eyes on the road. It's in your head. Ignore it. I turned on the radio. For a moment, nothing but silence. Then, a single voice. Lost? I turned the volume down. Hello? I whispered, though I didn't know why. The voice came again, garbled and broken. Turn back? I shut off the radio. The knocking sound had stopped, but my hands were shaking on the wheel. I needed to find my way back to the highway. Fast. But when I glanced at the GPS, my stomach twisted, because the screen was blank. The map, the route gone. Nothing but a flashing message. No destination found. And the road stretched on into the dark. MC attempts to escape, but the road won't let them. I tried to stay calm. I would just turn around. I slowed the RV, checking my mirrors, ready to do a U-turn. But then I saw it. The bridge. Right in front of me. I nearly slammed the brakes again. No, that wasn't possible. I had driven miles away. There was no way I had looped back around. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. And then, a figure stepped onto the road. Not a deer, not an animal, a person, standing right at the mouth of the bridge. I couldn't see details, just a dark outline against the dim glow of my headlights. They weren't moving, just standing there, watching. MC tries to get help, but no one else sees it. I fumbled for my phone again. Still no service. I gritted my teeth, trying to control my breathing. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't dreaming. I needed to get help. I put the RV in reverse, rolling back down the road, keeping my eyes locked on the figure. They didn't move, didn't react, just stood there. Then I saw headlights in my mirror. A pair of bright, white beams getting closer. Another car. Relief flooded my chest. I hit my hazard lights, rolling down my window, ready to wave them down. As the car pulled up beside me, I caught a glimpse of the driver, a middle-aged man in a flannel shirt. I leaned out, desperate. Hey, you see that person? But as I gestured toward the bridge, my stomach turned to ice, because the figure was gone. And the bridge? It wasn't there. The man gave me a confused look. You okay, buddy? I turned back toward the road. It was empty, like nothing had been there at all. My mouth went dry. No, I saw it. The screaming bridge. The figure. It was real, wasn't it? I forced a laugh. Shaky. Weak. Yeah, I muttered. Just tired, I guess. The man nodded, clearly unconvinced. Been on the road too long? I nodded. He hesitated before saying, There's a gas station a few miles up. Get some coffee, stretch your legs. I nodded again. Yeah, that's a good idea. The man gave a quick wave before driving off. I sat there for a long moment, my breath unsteady. Then I checked the GPS again. And now, suddenly, the route was back, like nothing had ever been wrong. I drove to the gas station. The place was old, barely lit, but blissfully normal. I stepped inside, grabbed a coffee, and stood at the counter, trying to calm my nerves. The cashier, an older man with tired eyes, gave me a glance. You look like you've seen a ghost, he muttered. I forced a smile. Long night. He nodded, taking my money. Then, as he handed me my change, he hesitated. Which road did you come from? I frowned. Some detour. Took a back road. His expression darkened. You didn't cross the bridge, did you? My blood ran cold. I licked my lips, forcing my voice steady. Why? The old man exhaled, shaking his head. Forget it. I didn't move. Forget what? I asked. He looked at me, eyes heavy with something like pity. Just don't go back that way. I swallowed hard. And if I do? The old man sighed. Then you'll hear them again. My heart pounded. Hear who? His gaze met mine. The ones who never made it across. MC tries to leave the area, but the road won't let them. The old man's words wouldn't leave my head. Then you'll hear them again. I left the gas station, gripping my coffee like it was an anchor to the real world. I wasn't going back that way. No chance in hell. My GPS was working now. I keyed in the nearest highway, then pulled onto the main road. The drive should have been simple. A straight shot for 10 miles, then a right turn onto the interstate. I could practically smell civilization. But after 15 minutes of driving, my stomach twisted. Because somehow, I was back on the same road. The same blank mile markers. The same faded road signs. And up ahead, the bridge. I slammed the brakes so hard my coffee spilled across the dashboard. I sat there, staring. I had followed the GPS. I had driven away. But the road had brought me back. It was impossible. Yet there it was, waiting. The bridge looked different. This time, something about the bridge was wrong. It wasn't just an old, abandoned structure anymore. It had changed. The guardrails looked bent and twisted, like metal that had melted and been reshaped by something inhuman. The pavement looked darker, slicker. And beneath the bridge, it was no longer just a deep, black river. It was moving, shifting, bubbling. Something wasn't right. I turned the wheel, forcing myself to go back. I pressed the gas hard. The RV's engine roared. The tires screeched against the pavement, but I didn't move. My hands trembled. I slammed the gas again. Nothing. It was like something had anchored me in place. Like the road itself was holding me here. A sound drifted through the air. Not the wind. Not the river. Screaming. But this time, it was closer. Not distant and muffled like before. I could hear voices. Individual words. Help me. Please, don't let it take me. IT hurts. Oh God, it hurts. I slapped my hands over my ears, heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want to know what had happened here. But the voices didn't stop. They grew louder, more desperate. I clenched my eyes shut, whispering to myself, "This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real." Then, something knocked against the RV. A slow, deliberate thud against the side of the RV. Not like the knocking before. This was heavier, like something was leaning against the door. I opened my eyes. For a long moment, I just sat there, breath shallow. Then another knock. Thud. My body locked up. It wasn't just one knock. There were multiple. On the door. On the windows. On the roof. Thud. 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 Like multiple hands tapping. Feeling. Searching. I sucked in a sharp breath, eyes darting toward the driver's side window. And that's when I saw it. A handprint. Smeared across the glass. Not fresh. Not from a living person. The skin looked wrong. Charred. Burnt. Twisted. And then, another one appeared. And another. And another. They were pressing against the glass. Reaching. Crawling. Like the bridge itself was pulling them up from below. My hand scrambled for my phone. Still no service. I squeezed my eyes shut. I wasn't alone. There were things out there. I forced myself to breathe, to think. If I could get the RV moving, if I could just get across the bridge, maybe it would let me go. I turned the key. The engine growled. The radio flickered on. At first, just static. Then, a voice. Not screaming this time. Not begging for help. It was soft, whispering, and it said my name. James. I froze. The voice wasn't mine, but it was familiar, like someone I used to know. Then the whisper changed, and what it said made my blood turn to ice. Come home. I gasped, snapping the radio off. This isn't real. I threw the RV into gear. The only way out is forward. The RV lurched ahead. I pressed the gas harder. The bridge rushed toward me. The screaming voices grew deafening. The windows fogged over, handprints smearing against the glass from the outside. My head pounded. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. And then, silence. The screaming stopped. Everything stopped. The RV was still. I opened my eyes, and I was in the middle of the bridge. I gasped, looking around. The RV had stopped on its own. Outside, the world looked different. The trees were gone. The sky was red. And below the bridge, I saw them. Not water. Not a river. Bodies. Hundreds. Thousands. All writhing. Struggling. Screaming. Their hands reaching up, their mouths wide with agony. This wasn't just a haunted bridge. This was a graveyard. A place that had been feeding on people for years. And now, it wanted me. I gritted my teeth. I wasn't staying. I hit the gas. The RV roared forward. The bridge shook beneath me. The voices below turned into wailing howls. Faster. Faster. Just get across. I could see the end of the bridge, just a few more feet. Then, a figure stepped in front of me. I yanked the wheel. The RV skidded, spun. And suddenly, I was falling, tumbling downward. into the darkness below. 1. MC is falling, but lands somewhere impossible. The RV tipped forward. The last thing I saw was the edge of the bridge rushing toward me. And then, darkness. No impact. No crash. Just an endless, suffocating void. For a long moment, I felt weightless, like I was floating in some empty, black abyss. And then, I hit the ground. But it wasn't water. It was solid. I gasped, my body jerking awake. I was still in the RV, but something was wrong. The RV wasn't sinking. It was parked, right in the center of the bridge. But this wasn't the same bridge. The sky was black, no stars, no moon, just endless darkness. The road stretched on forever in both directions, curving into the abyss. I wasn't just on a bridge anymore. I was inside something alive. And then, the screaming started again. I turned my head, slowly, fear crawling up my spine. I knew what was below me, but I didn't want to look. I couldn't, because this time, they were looking back. Hundreds, thousands, not just bodies, not just corpses, people, trapped, writhing, reaching, screaming, their mouths stretched open, eyes filled with eternal agony. And one of them looked just like me. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. No, that's not possible. I threw the RV into reverse. The tires screeched against the pavement, but the vehicle didn't move. The bridge was holding me here. The steering wheel twisted in my hands, on its own. The headlights flickered, then died completely. The air inside the RV grew thick, stifling. Then, a sound, not the screaming, something new, a voice, a whisper, from the passenger seat. You shouldn't have come back. My stomach turned to ice. I forced myself to look. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a shape, a figure, sitting in the passenger seat, watching me. It wasn't a person, not anymore. It was a hollow version of me, burnt, charred, its face melted and twisted, fused with shadows. But its eyes were alive, and they were smiling. The figure tilted its head, and then it spoke. You never left. My throat closed. I tried to speak, tried to deny it, but deep down I knew. I had never left this place. I had been trapped since the first time I crossed this bridge. The gas station, the old man, the loop. It had all been part of it, an illusion, a trick. The bridge had been playing with me, and now it was done waiting. No, I clenched my fists, forcing my mind to reject it. This isn't real. I lunged for the door, yanked it open. I would rather run than stay in here with that thing. But the second I stepped outside, I was falling again. The ground vanished beneath my feet. The bridge crumbled away, and I was plummeting down into the abyss below. I hit the ground, hard, but I wasn't dead. I was somewhere new. The air was thick, suffocating. The sky above me was red, burning. And around me, they were waiting. The trapped souls, the ones I had seen below the bridge. Hundreds, thousands, standing motionless, staring at me. And then all at once, they screamed, a howl of pure agony. And as the sound tore through my skull, I realized the truth. I wasn't a victim. I was one of them now, another soul swallowed by the bridge. And soon, someone else would come driving through, and I would be waiting. 1. MC is trapped, and no one can hear him. The screaming didn't stop. It surrounded me. Hundreds, no, thousands of voices, wailing, howling in eternal suffering. I stumbled backward, my ears ringing, my mind splitting apart. But the worst part was that I couldn't hear my own voice. I was screaming too, but no sound came out. I was just another ghost, another lost soul, absorbed by the bridge. And no one would ever hear me again. I squeezed my eyes shut. Wake up. Wake up. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I would wake up in my RV safe. The bridge would be behind me. I just had to wake up. I opened my eyes. I was still here. The sky burned above me, red and endless. The souls around me had stopped screaming, and now they were watching me. A whisper slithered through the silence. Low, hollow, a voice not quite human. You are one of us now. My chest tightened. I shook my head. No, I'm not. But deep down I knew. I wasn't standing on solid ground anymore. I was floating, weightless, just like them. And when I looked down, my feet weren't there. My body was fading. I reached for my own hands, but they were turning to smoke. I was disappearing, becoming part of the bridge itself. a glimpse of the outside world, but no one can see him. Then, a flicker, a shift in the darkness. For a split second, I saw something impossible. The real world, the bridge above me, the highway, the road, and a new vehicle, a silver SUV, a family inside, a mother driving, two kids in the back. They were laughing, smiling. They had no idea what was waiting for them. No idea that the bridge had already chosen them. MC tries to warn them, but it's hopeless. I lunged forward, tried to scream. Don't cross. Turn around. But my voice was nothing. A whisper in the void. They didn't even flinch. The bridge was already pulling them in. And soon, they would hear the screams too. They would join us. And I would be watching, just like the others. MC's mind begins to fracture. The horror is endless. The world around me warped. Time bent in on itself. The moments stretched, repeating. Again and again, I watched them cross. Every time, I tried to scream. Every time, I failed. I wasn't just a lost soul. I was part of the trap. I was part of the bridge itself. And this nightmare, it would never end. The final terror, MC sees his own reflection. The whispers grew louder. The air turned heavy. Something shifted in the shadows. And then, I saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the screaming souls. Watching me, it stepped forward, slowly, its face hidden in the dark, until the light from the burning sky hit it, and I saw who it was. Me. Not the me that had fallen. Not the me that had been trapped, but the me that had crossed the bridge weeks ago. The original me. Untouched. Alive. But its eyes, they were empty. It had taken my place. It was living my life now. And I was just another echo in the screaming void. The final, unsettling realization. I wanted to run. I wanted to wake up. But there was no waking up. This was reality. And the last thought that burned through my mind. The last thing I truly understood was that the bridge never took just one person. It always took two. The one who crossed, and the one who never left. And now, it was waiting for the next one. Waiting to take again. Waiting to scream. Final line, the bridge awaits. Above, the silver SUV reached the midpoint of the bridge. The mother glanced in the rearview mirror, and for the first time, she heard the scream. Next story. I never really liked traveling alone. Sure, it had its perks. No one to argue about the music, no tight schedules, just me, my RV, and an open road stretching endlessly before me. I had been doing these long-haul trips for a while, picking quiet routes, avoiding the city, and stopping wherever I pleased. It was supposed to be freeing, but sometimes the quiet is the worst part. This trip had started out normal enough. I had been on the road for about a week, cutting through back roads and old highways, the kind that rarely saw much traffic. There was something peaceful about empty roads and abandoned gas stations, a kind of stillness that made me feel like I had stepped out of time itself. It was early evening when I noticed the smell. I had pulled into an old roadside rest stop, just a cracked stretch of pavement surrounded by miles of nothing. The air was thick, heavy with humidity, and as I climbed out of the RV, I caught a whiff of something foul. Rotten. At first, I figured it was coming from the dumpsters nearby. They were overflowing, black bags stacked on top of each other, flies swarming like restless shadows. The kind of place that reeked of old food and forgotten things. I wrinkled my nose and moved toward the back of the RV, deciding to check the storage compartment before calling it a night. That's when I saw it. The suitcase. I frowned. I hadn't packed a suitcase. I had everything in duffel bags, neatly stowed inside. Yet, here it was, sitting right in the center of the compartment. It looked old, battered. The fabric was dark with stains, and as I stepped closer, I noticed something else. It was wet. I hesitated. The smell was stronger now, sickly sweet and pungent, like meat left out in the heat for too long. The kind of stench that clings to your skin, sinking into your lungs. I swallowed. Maybe someone had left it here by mistake. Maybe. A fly landed on the suitcase. I watched as it crawled along the fabric, moving lazily, and then, without warning, it spasmed and died. I took a step back. Something was wrong. I scanned the area, suddenly feeling exposed. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the pavement. The rest stop was empty, no cars, no other travelers. Just the faint rustling of the wind and the distant hum of insects. I shook my head, pushing the unease away. Maybe it was just trash. Some vagrant might have dumped their belongings here, left it behind when it got too heavy to carry. Maybe it was full of ruined clothes or water-damaged junk. That would explain the smell, right? Still, something about it made my skin crawl. I reached out hesitantly, pressing my fingers against the cold, damp fabric. The moment I touched it, I felt an odd resistance, as if something inside shifted slightly. I pulled my hand back. It was locked. The small, rusted combination lock dangled from the zipper, the numbers worn smooth from age. I exhaled slowly, shaking off the tension in my shoulders. It wasn't my problem. Whatever was in there wasn't mine. I glanced back at the RV, at the warm glow of the interior light spilling out onto the pavement. The thought of sleeping with that thing sitting just outside made my stomach turn. Fine. I grabbed the suitcase, wincing at the way the damp fabric squished under my fingers, and pulled it out. It was heavier than expected. Too heavy. The weight shifted unnaturally inside, like something thick and wet was sloshing around. I gagged, nearly dropping it. Nope. No way. I wasn't keeping this thing. I turned, heading straight for the dumpster. Flies buzzed angrily as I heaved the suitcase up, letting it drop with a heavy thud into the pile of trash below. The sound it made was wet, unnatural. I stepped back, wiping my hands against my jeans. There. Done. I took one last glance at the darkening rest stop before heading back to the RV, locking the doors behind me. Still, the smell lingered. Inside, I tried to shake off the discomfort. The RV was warm, familiar. My little home on wheels. I made some coffee, turned on some background noise, and settled in for the night. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but the unease wouldn't go away. Every time I breathed in, I swore I could still smell it. I checked my clothes, my hands, even wiped down the counters. Nothing, but the scent clung to the air, faint but unmistakable. Then somewhere in the distance, I heard a soft, wet thud. I froze. It had come from outside. I turned off the TV, straining my ears. The night was silent. No crickets, no wind. Just waiting. I swallowed, pushing myself up from the couch. Just a coincidence. Maybe something fell over. Maybe a raccoon was digging through the dumpster. Still, I checked the locks again. As I moved toward the window, my foot squished against the floor. I looked down. There, seeping from under the storage compartment door, was a dark, wet stain. I couldn't breathe. No, I had thrown it away. Slowly, my shaking hand reached for the door handle. I swallowed the rising nausea and yanked it open. The suitcase sat right there, waiting, soaked, dripping. The smell hit me all at once, overwhelming and suffocating. Rot, death, decay. And as I stood there, paralyzed, the suitcase's lock clicked open on its own. I should have left. I should have started the engine, thrown it into drive, and never looked back. But instead, I just stood there, staring at the suitcase. It shouldn't have been there. I had thrown it away. I had heard it hit the dumpster, had walked away from it, had locked my RV behind me. And yet, here it was. Soaked, leaking, waiting. A shudder ran down my spine. I took a step back, then another. I could feel the air inside the RV shifting, thickening, as if the walls were pressing in. I wasn't touching that thing again. I grabbed a broom from the kitchenette, my fingers tightening around the handle, and used it to nudge the suitcase. The moment the bristles brushed against it, a sound bubbled up from inside. A wet squelch, like something shifting, stirring. I yanked the broom away. My breath came fast, uneven. The suitcase just sat there, dripping its blackened fluid onto my RV floor. This wasn't normal. I moved toward the door, fumbling with the lock, desperate to get it out, again. I wasn't making the same mistake. Whatever was happening, I didn't want it inside with me. I grabbed a pair of old gloves, pulled them on, and forced myself to reach for the handle. My fingers clenched around the damp leather, the fabric squishing unnaturally beneath my grip. I gagged but forced myself to move, dragging it toward the open door. It was even heavier now, like whatever was inside had grown. The second the wheels touched the ground outside, I let go and slammed the door shut, locking it twice over. I backed away, heart pounding, waiting, listening. For a moment, there was only silence. Then from just beyond the door, I heard it. A soft click, the sound of the suitcase unlocking itself. I stumbled backward, my stomach twisting. My body was screaming at me to run, to get in the driver's seat and go. But I didn't, because I heard something else. A rustling, a shift, and then a breath, right outside, a restless night. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, gripping a flashlight, staring at the locked door like something might burst through at any second. The RV felt too small, too fragile. Outside, the wind howled. At least, I thought it was the wind, but every so often, I swore I heard something drag across the gravel. A slow, deliberate movement. And the worst part, the smell never left. It should have been gone the moment I threw the suitcase out, but it lingered thick and sickly sweet. It clung to the air, to my clothes, to my skin. No matter how much I tried to breathe through my mouth, I could taste it. Something rotting, something old. By 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I had to look. I moved toward the window, slow, careful. My hands trembled as I pulled the curtain back just an inch, just enough to see. Nothing. Just the empty rest stop, the cracked pavement glowing pale under the moonlight. And then, movement. I barely had time to process it before something darted past my window. A shadow, low to the ground, fast. My breath hitched. I staggered back, pulse hammering. It wasn't a coyote, it wasn't a stray dog. It was something else, something that shouldn't be there. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to think. I wasn't staying here. I needed to go. I turned toward the driver's seat. Bang. A loud, deafening thud against the side of the RV. I choked back a scream, spinning toward the noise. The whole vehicle shook. And then from just outside the door I heard it, a wet dragging sound. Something was climbing. Nowhere feels safe. I never ran to the front so fast in my life. I slammed the key into the ignition, twisted. The engine stuttered. I cursed under my breath, hands shaking violently as I tried again. Come on, come on. The engine coughed, sputtered, and finally roared to life. I threw it into drive. Outside, something hit the RV again, a loud, fleshy impact. I didn't wait to see what it was. I just pressed my foot down on the gas and tore out of there. I didn't stop, not for miles. The road stretched endlessly ahead of me, illuminated by the glow of my headlights. I drove with white-knuckled hands, refusing to look in the mirrors, refusing to check if something was behind me. It wasn't until the sun started to rise that I finally pulled over, exhausted. I parked at a well-lit gas station, one with people, with noise. A place that felt real. I stepped out, sucking in deep, clean breaths of morning air. The scent of coffee and gasoline. No more rot. For the first time in hours, I let myself breathe. I was safe. The suitcase returned. I took my time, stretching my legs, trying to shake the lingering unease. The gas station was small but welcoming. A couple of cars parked outside, a clerk stacking shelves inside. I grabbed a coffee, something warm, something that tasted like normal life. For a little while, I felt okay. I even convinced myself that I had imagined it all. Maybe the smell had been an old food container tucked somewhere in my RV. Maybe the thuds had been the wind. Maybe the shadow had been an animal. I was overtired, stressed. I just needed sleep. I took one last sip of coffee, tossing the cup in the trash before heading back to the RV. And then, I stopped. The smell was back. I felt my stomach twist, my body go cold. No. I turned toward the storage compartment, heart pounding, breath coming in short gasps. I already knew what I would see. I just didn't want to believe it. Slowly, I reached out, hesitating just for a second before I unlatched the door. And there it was, the suitcase, sitting right where it had been the first time. This time, the lock was already undone, and the zipper was partially open. Something inside had moved. I slammed the compartment shut, staggering backward. This wasn't possible. I had left it miles away. I had seen it in my rear view, shrinking into the distance. It should not be here, but it was. It always would be. And from inside the suitcase, beneath the damp, rotting fabric, something shifted. And this time I swore I heard it. A breath. Something alive. Waiting. I didn't touch it this time. I didn't try to move it, didn't try to open it, didn't even go near it. I just stood there, my breath tight in my chest, staring at the damp, sagging suitcase sitting in the RV storage compartment. It followed me. That thought rooted deep in my brain, thick and heavy like tar. I had thrown it away twice. I had driven miles and miles from that rest stop, crossed county lines, changed direction just to put distance between me and it. And yet, it was back. I felt sick. This wasn't just bad luck. This wasn't a mix-up. This wasn't possible. But it was real. I could see it. I could smell it. And I could hear it. A slow, soft squelching noise. Something inside was shifting. Something was alive in there. I stepped back. I couldn't be here anymore. I couldn't be anywhere near this thing. I turned, rushing into the RV, locking the door behind me. I wouldn't look at it. I wouldn't touch it. I would drive until I found somewhere with people, with light, with noise. I sat in the driver's seat, jammed the key into the ignition, turned. Click. Nothing. I twisted the key again. Click. Nothing. My pulse skipped. I tried again, harder, my foot stamping the gas. Click. Click. The engine was dead. The RV wouldn't start. And then, from somewhere beneath me, inside the vehicle, a noise. A wet, dragging sound. Like something crawling. Like something moving toward me. Something is inside. I went still. The air in the RV felt thick, heavy. The smell had intensified. Not just rot, something deeper. Like the scent of earth and age, wet stone and open grave. Something wrong. I could hear it moving somewhere below my feet. Something in the vents? In the undercarriage? How? I slowly, carefully shifted my leg off the gas pedal. The RV was silent. And then, just as I thought maybe I had imagined it. Tap, tap, tap. Something pressed against the underside of the floor, right beneath my seat. I shot up, scrambling out of the driver's seat. My head spun, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. Something was inside. Not outside. Inside. And the RV wasn't that big. I needed to get out. I stumbled toward the door, fumbling with the lock, but bang. Something slammed against the underside of the RV hard. The whole vehicle rocked. I choked on a scream, my fingers going numb. It was strong. Stronger than anything should be. Then, the ceiling creaked. Like something was pressing against it from the inside. No. That wasn't possible. The ceiling was solid. There was no space inside the roof. But the weight was there, pressing down, and then directly above me. A breath. Long, slow. Wet. My knees almost gave out. I should have run. I should have thrown open the door, jumped out, never looked back. But I made a mistake. I looked up. The ceiling was wrong. The solid panels were bulging, the shape shifting subtly, pulsing. Like something was pressed against it from the inside, like it was breathing. And then as I stared, too horrified to move, the shape started to change. Something pushed outward, a bulge formed, stretching, straining. And then the ceiling split open. Just for a second, just long enough to see. Fingers, gray, withered fingers sliding through the crack, moving, grasping, reaching. For me. I screamed. I didn't think, I just moved. I grabbed the closest thing to me, a wrench from the counter, and swung at the ceiling. The second metal made contact, the bulging shape snapped back. The ceiling was solid again, like nothing had ever happened, like I had imagined it, except I hadn't, because the smell was still there, and so was the suitcase. The suitcase wants to be opened. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move. I just sat, knees to my chest, watching the suitcase through the small window near the door. It sat in the storage compartment, waiting, and I knew somehow deep in my bones, they wanted me to open it. That was the only reason it kept coming back. It was never going to stop, unless I opened it. I shook my head, burying my face in my hands. I wasn't doing it. I wasn't. A whisper. I froze. It was so quiet, right outside the door. A voice, wet and cracked with age. It said one word. Please. I shuddered violently. No. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and called 911. The call didn't go through. No service. I stared at the screen, cold creeping into my chest. I had just been on the internet an hour ago. The signal had been fine, but now nothing. Like the RV was being cut off. Like something was keeping me here. And then, a second whisper. This time inside. Let me out. The impossible proof. I couldn't stay here. I grabbed my keys, slammed them into the ignition, twisted. This time, the RV roared to life. The engine started. I almost cried. I threw it into drive, tearing out of the gas station parking lot. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. The first town I saw, I stopped at a diner, ran inside, and locked myself in the bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wild, hollow. I splashed cold water on my face, breathing hard. I needed to calm down. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe. VZZT. My phone vibrated. I almost dropped it. It was a picture message from an unknown number. With shaking hands, I opened it, and I felt my stomach drop. It was a photo of me. Not from earlier. Not from yesterday. From right now. Sitting in this very bathroom. Taken from outside the stall. I jolted, heart hammering, and then I smelled it. That same, rotting scent. Filling the stall. I turned slowly, my breath catching. And there it was, in the corner of the stall. A small, damp suitcase. Unzipped. Just enough for something inside to move. Something inside to breathe. Something inside to watch me. Waiting. The suitcase was open. Not fully, just enough. Just enough for something inside to breathe. Just enough for something inside to move. The damp zipper was curled back, exposing a sliver of darkness. And from that darkness, I felt it. Eyes. Watching me. Waiting. I stood frozen in the bathroom stall, my phone slipping from my fingers. It hit the floor with a dull thud, and in that silence I heard it, a sound inside the suitcase. A slow, wet shift, like flesh dragging across fabric, like something waking up. Then a whisper. You brought me with you. My pulse spiked. The whisper wasn't in my head. It was inside the suitcase. The voice was thin, broken, like vocal cords long dead, dry and cracking, forcing out sound for the first time in years. I stumbled back, slamming against the bathroom stall. This wasn't possible. It wasn't possible. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breath shaking. Not real. That's what I told myself, over and over. I just needed to leave this bathroom. I needed to get out of here. I reached for the stall door. Click. I froze. The lock had turned. On its own. I was locked in. And then the suitcase twitched. Something inside was trying to get out. No way out. I grabbed the lock, my fingers fumbling, twisting, pulling. It wouldn't budge. The metal was ice cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. I slammed my shoulder against the stall. Nothing. The walls were thin, the door was flimsy, but I felt like I was pushing against solid cement. A heavy, dead weight pressed against the other side, holding it shut, keeping me in. My breathing came fast, shallow. I turned. The suitcase was closer. I hadn't touched it, hadn't moved, but it was now just inches from my feet, and I could hear it. Inside, a slow, wet dragging sound, like fingers tracing the inside of the case, like something testing the limits of its prison. And then softly, I remember you. The suitcase opened. I choked back a sob. No, 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 no. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my back against the stall. I had to get out. I had to get out. I kicked the suitcase hard. The impact sent it sliding across the stall floor. It hit the wall, and the zipper snapped open. The suitcase spilled forward. Something dark and wet tumbled out. I didn't want to look, but I did. I had to. I had to see. A hand. Gray, shriveled, its fingers twisting, curling, moving. It was attached to something. A limp, decayed arm. A shoulder. A face. Its jaw stretched open. Its eyes locked onto mine. And then, it crawled toward me. It wants me to take its place. I screamed. I kicked, scrambled, tried to climb the stall wall. The thing lurched forward, its fingers clawing at the floor, dragging itself closer. I could see its ribs pushing through torn skin, the way its jaw hung open, too wide, like the muscles had rotted away. And its eyes, black, sunken, but aware. It was looking at me, recognizing me. It was never just a suitcase. It was never just an object. It was a coffin, a trap, and now it was open. Now it was letting something out. Or worse, it was making room for someone new. Me, the final bargain. It reached out, gripping my ankle. Its fingers were wet, soft, too strong, holding me in place. The stall tilted. Or maybe it was just me. The walls stretched, melted, darkened. Everything was turning inside out. The walls of the bathroom peeled away like damp wallpaper. The cold air turned thick, wet, suffocating. And suddenly, I wasn't in the bathroom anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere underground. The smell of earth, mold, and old fabric pressed against my face. I was in the suitcase, and I could hear the zipper closing. I screamed, thrashing, clawing, pushing against the sides. The fabric was tight, damp, suffocating. I could feel something else in here with me, shifting, moving. It was trying to push me out, trading places, escape or a lie. I don't remember how I got out. 1 second, I was inside. The next, I was on the bathroom floor. The stall door was wide open. The suitcase was gone, like it had never been there. I crawled to my feet, stumbling out of the bathroom, gasping for air. The diner was still there. People still sat at their booths, eating, talking, like nothing had happened. But when I looked in the mirror by the register, I looked different. My skin was pale. My eyes looked sunken, like I had been underground for days. Or worse, like something had changed inside me. And then I saw it, outside, in the parking lot. My RV was still there, and beside it, a new suitcase, small, worn, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it. The pressure. Like something was laying on top of me. Like something was inside my skin. I sat in the driver's seat of the RV, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Outside, the diner parking lot was still and empty. The streetlights buzzed, casting sickly yellow halos across the pavement. And there it was, the suitcase, sitting beside my RV, waiting, just like before. I never took it with me. I never even touched it. And yet, there it was. Again, the suitcase follows. I told myself I was hallucinating, that the whole thing in the diner bathroom was just a panic attack. Maybe I'd even fallen asleep at the wheel before I got here. A bad dream. A really bad dream. And yet, I could smell it, even from inside the RV. That same damp, rotting stench. Like old leather soaked in something dead. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered. Once. Twice. Then died. The dashboard lights flickered, then went dark. A dead battery. Or something worse. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until the suitcase wanted me to. Something is inside me now. I stared at it for what felt like hours. Waiting. I don't know what I expected it to do. Maybe shift. Maybe open on its own. Maybe whisper my name. But nothing happened. The worst part? I was more afraid of myself than of it. Because I was tempted to open it. Somewhere, deep in my skull, I felt it calling me. Felt the weight of it in my hands, even though I hadn't touched it. I could hear the faintest sound of a zipper, slowly pulling itself open. I slammed my fists against the dashboard, gripping my hair. No, I wouldn't go near it. I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't. I looked up. The suitcase was gone. No escape. I didn't move. Didn't even breathe. It wasn't possible. I had been watching it the whole time. There was no wind, no one outside, but it was gone. The night felt heavier, like the air had thickened, pressing against my skin. I swallowed hard, reaching for my keys again. I twisted the ignition. The engine roared to life. The headlights flooded the parking lot with light. Nothing. No suitcase. No sign that it had ever been there. I laughed. A dry, broken sound. Maybe it really had been a hallucination. Maybe I was finally free of it. I took a deep, shuddering breath and put the RV in gear. Time to go. But it never leaves. I drove for hours. The highway stretched out in front of me, an endless ribbon of black cutting through the night. Every so often, I checked the rearview mirror, half expecting to see it. The suitcase. But there was nothing. The tension in my shoulders eased. I told myself it was over. Whatever had happened, whatever I'd seen, it was behind me now. Then I pulled into a gas station, and I saw it, right outside my RV, sitting neatly beside the gas pump, waiting, like it had been with me the entire time. My breath hitched. No, I'd left it miles away. I'd watched it disappear. It couldn't be here, but it was. And this time, it was closer. Something is changing me. I locked the RV doors and tried to ignore it. I filled my tank. I avoided looking at the suitcase. I didn't touch it, but the moment I climbed back into the driver's seat, I felt something shift. Inside me, like a gear clicking into place, like a door unlocking. My vision blurred. For just a second, I saw something else. Not the gas station, not my RV. I saw darkness, a tight, enclosed space. I could feel fabric pressing against my face. My arms locked at my sides. I was inside the suitcase, and someone was zipping it closed. I gasped, snapping back to reality. I was in my RV. The gas station was still there. The suitcase was still outside, but the feeling remained. The sick, gnawing certainty. I had been inside it. The final unsettling truth. I drove without stopping for the rest of the night. I needed distance. Time. But no matter how far I went, it followed. Every time I pulled over, it was there, sitting just outside the RV. And every time, it was a little closer. A few days passed. Then a week. I stopped at a motel to get real sleep. And that's when I made the worst mistake of my life. I checked the mirror. I shouldn't have. But I did. And I saw it. My reflection was smiling. But I wasn't. I raised my hand. The reflection didn't move. It just kept smiling. And then, it blinked. And I felt something heavy settle into my chest. Something old. Something wrong. Like I was carrying an extra weight inside me. And that's when I understood. The suitcase was never the trap. It was never the prison. It was the door. And I had already stepped through. One last look. I never saw the suitcase again after that. It stopped appearing outside my RV, stopped waiting at gas stations, stopped following me. But that doesn't mean it's gone. Because sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I feel it. That tight, suffocating pressure. Like I'm inside something. Like I've never really left. And every time I pass by a mirror, I don't check it anymore. Because I know what I'll see. A version of me that doesn't move when I do. A version of me that smiles just a little too wide. Waiting. Just waiting. For someone else to find the suitcase. And take my place.